So when did nutrition kind of come online for you, and what were sort of the big rocks that you were turning over early as you adopted that into your model?
Well, first off, what you're saying would be on my epitaph, where you don't have to do it my way, but like, to say that, some of these terminologies in other workplaces, would be part of their core values. No one would ever say that's not my job. Like if somebody says that's not my job, then you have a problem. So I would extend all of those different aspects that you have to know enough. You have to know a little bit about a lot of things. You have to know enough about these other things to find what is the lowest hanging fruit, or where is, maybe lack of better term, the bottleneck. So for instance, I believe that anyone has access to the absolute best hypertrophy training program, because it really ain't that hard. Okay, so you can go to any, and it would probably be very, very effective. I don't think anybody would ever look at this. This looks like you should put on a lot of mass training this way, but they left out the part of what you should eat. Even not just from a very simple calorie surplus standpoint. Like, you will not gain significant muscle. First of all, you won't gain any muscle if you're not eating anything. Okay, blah blah blah. My point in bringing up that sensational example is just that you could be doing something great in one space, but if you have no eyes on this other space, I had this was probably 3-4 years ago, and I kind of had this. This wasn't the seminal moment, but it's a good example where, because it was easy to get fooled. I think he's in his early 30s, and he's on his third knee surgery. Surfer, probably did, incomplete rehabilitation. Maybe the surgeon wasn't the best in the world, but after 2 or 3, you're not always going to make chicken salad on a knee surgery. And the quad was not getting bigger, and I thought what we were doing was right. And I'm like, hey, insert name of patient. How much protein do you eat? He goes, I said, do me a favor. Write down everything you eat tomorrow, and then when you come back the next day, I want to look at it. He was having like 49 grams of protein. And this is not a sloppy, this is not super skinny. And I'm like, it should make sense that, like, I could give you the best hypertrophy program for this quad after surgery, but muscles don't get bigger from nothing. Like, there's more of this thing, so you need the raw material. And then if you can just agree with that, let's start to slide down the hill and then in what makes most sense for you. But if I didn't even ask, I'm like, got to be a bad surgery, or I'm a bad rehab person, I suck. Maybe we should train harder, and now his knee hurts. When in fact, even though I'm not a registered dietitian, that I do. And the thing with nutrition is it sucks. I get it. I understand, because there's a lot of nutrition people that get really upset. But this is 2025. There is no physical interaction. It's not like cracking somebody's neck. If you crack somebody's neck, you have to practice that. Even that is an example where if the person lets you practice it, you can get better at it. You didn't have to go to chiropractic school or PT school or osteopathic school to learn to do this thing. There's no psychomotor activity when it comes to nutrition. So in 2025, there is no bit of information that I don't have access to that this registered dietitian does. I can get every book they have. I can go on every online. I can read every bit of research. And if you let me get my reps in guiding this nutrition, sorry, man, that's the way it goes. Just like there's bad physical therapists in 2-day courses, and there's a lot of those courses that you can take. So when it comes to nutrition, you can kind of get your reps in. You and I have every ability to get every book that an orthopedic surgeon has in their fellowships. We could probably do the simulators, but we will likely not get repetitions on a real person as a resident. So we can't learn how to fail. We can't learn. But with nutrition, you can. And that's where, look, when I got, even at MARSOC, we had a dietitian. And I would talk to other staff that was more trusted. And I'm like, what are we doing here? She doesn't do anything. Like, at that point in MARSOC, I think it only existed for 2 or 3 years. There was no supplements. You couldn't control what they ate. Like, none of this. Why do we even have a nutritionist or a registered dietitian? Why do we have, we're not providing any information for them. She would just talk with like the husband and wife and tell them what to buy at the store, but that's it. When I got to drive with Don, nutrition was a part of it because Don was so steeped in his bodybuilding culture. So it became something that was just always there, and it's certainly not against anything. And then we had, certain, I don't even know what they would be because again, when it comes to nutrition, and certainly people have access to information, so you might not have, anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. They're like measuring mercury in your hair and all this type of functional stuff. And look, if it helps somebody feel better, like to me that I may not know what it means, but I certainly think, hey, don't spend the rent money on it. And then of course that became as physical, what would we call it, commercial physical culture grew. It shows all of these different things, where all these things are all connected and there's arrows going in every direction. But there would always be a case of where some type of supplementation creates this amazing result that wasn't being created. I found Sunil Jain in around 2012 through a good friend at the time named Jimmy Ewan, and that was the first time I had ozone and an IV. And you know how I know it worked? The next time I had a red line, it was like the first time I ever had a red line, and I was ready to run through a wall. So, and then when you have those personal interventions, both as a patient and or a coach, you start to realize, hey, this matters. And now it's to the point that how could it not matter? How could this not be part of a solution? And if nutrition is the first entry point to get someone into this universe of preparation, that's cool. But the nutritionist is not allowed to think nutrition is the most important. I don't think the stuff that I'm best at is the most important. That's not how this works. Unfortunately, because nutrition is typically marginalized, because there is registered dietitian is probably a very small percentage of people that intervene with nutrition. They become disrespected, and that's unfortunate. But that's that. Nothing is the most important until the objective evaluation tells you that. And I've seen patients that were referred to me, and I probably stared at weeks or months of New York City hourly physical therapy rate, and I said, you know what? I could train you, but you probably should find a functional medicine, physician, because your leg didn't break for no reason. You actually squat kind of okay. Like I'm not saying I can't do anything for you, but I'd rather you spend your money on a nutrition or medical, pseudo medical, whatever we would call it, intervention. And I referred her to people that, it's New York. Everybody's got a guy. So it's, I don't remember where I sent her at that time, but so there was a lot of those opportunities. But the knee rehab would be the most sensational one, even though it wasn't the first.
Yeah, it's funny how many, like there's a common thread that's tying a lot of this together, and how much of like sort of the evolution and the way you've built your model actually stems from your own physical practice, like you training yourself. Whether it's my shoulder hurts and I can't squat as much, we actually probably got to think a little bit more globally about the interventions we use for athletes. Or, hey, your leg is small. You know what I did when my leg was small? I ate a bunch of food and I hit an adequate amount of protein. It's funny, I couldn't help but think of, and I use this quote a lot when I'm talking to clinicians, when we talk about like axillary nerve palsy and shoulder dislocations, the opening scene of Pumping Iron. Do you remember? Obviously you've seen it. So it's Schwarzenegger, and they kind of got like the weird spacey alien music in the background, and it's just like close-up videos of him like lifting at the old Golds on Rose Avenue. And it's like overdubbed with his audio. It's right before him and Franco Columbu put on the tutus and do that whole little spiel. And he talks about the art of bodybuilding. And he's like, in his Austrian accent, he's like, his sculptor would make the deltoid out of the clay, but the bodybuilder, we go in and we pump up the deltoid and we make the deltoid. And it's like when I bring up cases of dislocations or shoulder separations with a flat deltoid, I'm like, Schwarzenegger would walk in and know how to do this rehab. He'd be like, okay, at the bottom, we could look at the rotator cuff, we could look at the serratus, we could look at the AC joint and all that. But at the end of the day, the guy doesn't have a deltoid. So it's like a lot of the rehab that the big people, that the rehab specialists miss, is the obvious thing to someone who is an outlier, right? Like Arnold Schwarzenegger would absolutely be an outlier in physical therapy rehabilitation circles. But he walks in.
Yeah. I start rolling my eyes because you know, I'm probably not very well known or respected in the American Physical Therapy Association world, where like I don't even, I just say, look, I'm on another planet where I'm like, why don't you just do some lateral raises? Like I
Yeah.
know that, like that's,
Yeah.
it's funny you say that because, I actually would call that, and look, we both know, and everybody listening knows, that doesn't work for every single situation, what you're describing. And what you're describing is what I call rehab for meatheads. Find what hurts. Can you do it in any way possible where it doesn't hurt, including below gravity? Meaning the band is pulling your arm up. And I've actually systematized a couple different protocols that are all very, very consistent with biology. But rehab for meatheads, find the movement that hurts. Can you do it in any way possible where it doesn't hurt? Yes. Can you do it with any load? Just do it as heavy as you possibly can, which might mean below gravity, and do it for as many reps as you can. If you can get up to 100 reps, you can probably make it heavier. Like that's rehab for meatheads.
Yeah.
And if it, now of course it's not going to work for everything. No matter what Louis Simmons would say.
Yeah. Oh God, rest in peace. I mean, I think it's interesting because you talked about, I mean, the outliers, another thread that kind of goes through this, and I wonder is kind of going back to your basketball days, because my recollection, and you can tell me whether or not this is true, and I've seen cycles and trends in the conventional strength and conditioning space over the course of the last 15 years or so. Was that an era that was predominantly on the S&C side, sort of ruled by Olympic weightlifting? Was that big
No.
in your era? No, it wasn't. Okay, I was
Never,
curious.
Never. No, you would never see. So if an NBA player in my time, Kobe obviously was known for doing that. I had Kyle Korver but again, Kyle Korver came from a very traditional Midwestern college at Creighton, where they Olympic lifted, and it obviously when you watch somebody Olympic lift, it's obvious if they have been coached and know how to do it. But there was very little. I think I probably came at a point where, even if that was part of it, what we saw a lot was from the Chicago Bulls lineage and how those guys kind of filtered around the league. But even then, they were still doing presses and pulls way more than catches and snatches. But no, Kobe, definitely, Kyle. I can't really think of anybody else.
Yeah, I'm curious. When I was powerlifting at the beginning, I was at Stanford as a strength coach in the beginning of my career as I started my powerlifting career. And it was about the tail end of the Olympic weightlifting trend in strength and conditioning. Now, I kind of came in and I was like, well, I'm a chiropractor kind of first, and I have maybe a little bit more experience there, at least in formal education. And then I came into the weight room, and I was like, well, I'm a strength coach now, but I'm probably not going to be whatever the best strength coach is, but I may be the best chiropractor in this weight room, right? I may be able to bring that framing into it. So I wonder, because I see, in the way that the different opportunities you've had in your career, the different hats that you've worn, having this multifaceted, like yourself as an athlete, or and we could argue about the validity of a claim of a powerlifter as an athlete. We can go back and forth on that, I'm sure. But
no one's allowed to tackle you. No one's allowed to tackle you, so you're not an athlete
until the barbell hits back. The one thing I will say, and I was thinking about this when you were talking about geared powerlifting, and it was something that was elucidated to me when, do you know, he's a good friend of mine, Jesse Burdick, who was at Westside.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, Jesse's.
He was, because the dude that was doing the podcast was the guy that ran Mark Bell's podcast.
Oh, okay.
And obviously Burdick is from the same area.
Right. Yeah. So one of my first practices was in Burdick's gym, and I was obviously like a raw powerlifter. My first practice was in Dan Green's gym at Boss Barbell Club, which was, that was a pretty intense place to train. We had about 4 or 5 world record holders: Christy Hawkins, Emily Hu, Dan Green, Andrew Herbert. And I would go over to the East Bay and I would practice at Jesse's gym once a week. And he comes from the geared powerlifting background, and it was something to be said about, and he kind of brought this to my attention. He goes, have you ever tried to squat a weight that you couldn't squat? I was like, not really. Like, by the time I hit third attempt, I'm pretty confident at like the 102, 105%, attempt. I got a kind of a mathematical equation, at least I thought I did, in the way that I pick my attempts. He goes, yeah, That's what geared powerlifting is. You know how insane you have to be to get under something you know you can't lift? And I was like, it totally opened up like this whole newfound respect for geared powerlifting, because I'm like, oh yeah, you guys are out of your fucking mind.
Yeah, that's, especially if you lose it, because but whatever. I have other hills to die on. I'm going to die on the FMS hill way before geared powerlifting hill. So it's that Burdick, I connect with him a lot, and then I forget the interviewer's name right now. I'm thinking way too fast, but he's like, how do you know Burdick? And I'm like, well, because I was a power lifter that then started to talk about a lot of these rehab things. So then I was like their voice, if you will. And that's, very flattering. But yeah, here. And then obviously you start to realize when you work in sports and oh, him. Oh, yeah. That's, I like him a lot.
I kind of want to pivot quickly, because you said something earlier that it really stuck with me, and it's something that I think of the pieces of advice that I don't love giving advice, but the things that I always try to highlight when I outline the 10 years that I've been in this, which seems trivial in talking to you, is you talked about the point in which you made the decision, and you could classify it as a mistake of like, if I skip this opportunity to go to the Nets and I go to the pediatric rehabilitation client, that's going to be a career opportunity. Now, I can't stress enough when I'm having conversations with people about the trajectory of their career, because obviously, people, it's a Saturday in the middle of the afternoon. We have all the time in the world to kind of chat online. We have sort of freedom of time and space. You have a tremendous Pikachu collection behind you. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people would wake up and be like, God damn it, I want to be like Charlie. But I think there's such a value in going like, all right, well, it's not just MARSOC, it's not just, pro athletes and all this. It's some really hard and sometimes shitty decisions you have to make. Like, how do you relay that? Because I'm sure, if people come to me for advice, there's definitely like 10 times more people coming to you for advice. Like, in the trajectory of your career, how important have those hard decisions been? And like, are there more examples where you're like, look, it's not all just like it falls into your lap. You kind of got to reach these fork in the road and go like, what do you actually want?